meantime, US President Joe Biden is reportedly asking Israel to delay that ground incursion into Gaza so that more work can be done to negotiate the release of hostages and humanitarian aid to get in. So any sign that will happen, and how much influence does the US have on an issue like this so delicate?
President Biden, I suppose, has already prompted a delay of sorts by actually coming to Israel. So during that time when he was in town, clearly Israel was not going to launch a ground offensive while the president of Israel's closest ally was in town. The US, of course, has more influence on Israel than any other country, not just because it provides more military aid than any other country, but the US is Israel's closest ally. Now, we understand that the US has been leaning on Israel to delay ground operations, as you say, to try to get more progress, more success, if you like, in getting Hamas to release some of the 200 plus hostages that it's holding. We saw them release 2 Israeli Americans on Friday. They want more to be released. They're also working on trying to get more humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip as well. Now, when he was asked about the US leaning on Israel to delay ground operations, Secretary of State Antony Blinken simply said that this is a matter for the Israelis. This is a decision that Israel has to make. And when President Biden was asked, his response, without giving anything away clearly, was saying, I am talking to the Israelis. That's all he would say. So there are conversations going on. Israel also talking to other world leaders. We've already had the Prime Minister of Italy, Prime Minister of the UK, in addition to President Biden, meeting with Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, in Israel. We're expecting the French President and the Dutch Prime Minister to come to Israel today. They will clearly be talking about security issues in addition to the humanitarian situation and the hostage situation. Whether they will discuss plans for a ground offensive, we don't know as of yet. One imagines it will come up in conversation, but Israel has a number of factors that it's playing with, not just perhaps being lent on by the United States, but also where the hostages are, perhaps fresh intelligence that it's getting as to where they are, as to where Hamas's tunnels, the tunnel network that it maintains under the Gaza Strip is located, and even things as mundane as the weather could be affecting preparations. Ultimately, it's a political decision, and the decision to go in either hasn't been made yet, or the decision of when to go in hasn't been made yet, even if it's already been communicated to the troops who, as we know, have been massing outside the Gaza Strip for, 2 weeks now, Rosemary.
Elliot Godkin bringing us that live report from London. Many thanks. And CNN's Nick Robertson is in Sderot, near the border with Gaza, and has more on the next stages of the war.
Bristling with battle-ready troops, farmers' fields north of Gaza churn with the controlled fury of a nation readying for an incursion to strike Hamas. Yet they are waiting with no explanation why. It feels like the early rush for battle readiness has passed. The troops are deployed, standing by. The question is, how long can they be kept out here? According to former IDF General Israel Ziv, as long as is needed, there are military gains.
We are now improving our intelligence and our capacity of targets.
But the political calculation here is more complicated.
I think both in Washington and in Jerusalem, they understand that the legitimization window is closing quickly.
Civilian losses in Gaza are growing. More than a third of them children, according to Palestinian health officials. Lengthy negotiations have led to 2 American hostages released, as a tiny amount of humanitarian aid has crossed into Gaza that Israel fears ends up in Hamas's hands. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's calculus of when to send in ground troops has never been so fraught, under pressure from the White House for more hostage releases.
Netanyahu is in real problem. He cannot say no to Biden, but he cannot say yes to the humanitarian aid that drifts into northern Gaza.
But he is also under pressure at home too. Military and others hawkish for a decisive blow against Hamas.
We are finishing preparing, the ground force because we've changed plans. We are going maneuvering.
Netanyahu's dilemma compounded by his dependence on American weapons.
The pressure is from Washington is real. Is real and strong, and the Prime Minister says many times to his ministers, listen, we are getting from the United States more than you know.
Where less than a week ago these fields were teeming with tanks, troops making last-minute repairs. Today there are just tracks in the sand. There's a soldier's jacket here, bread in a bag on the table. The question is, where have all the tanks gone? Forward for an incursion, or back to base for a pause? Close to the front line in Gaza these days, more questions than answers. An incursion still highly probable, but when? Nick Robertson, CNN, Sderot, Israel.
Joining me now from Brisbane, Australia, is Peter Layton, a visiting fellow at the Griffith Asia Institute. Appreciate you joining us.
Hi.
So, the US and others fear this war could expand beyond Israel's borders, with both the US Secretary of State and the US Defense Secretary voicing their concern this war could escalate. How do they prevent that from happening, given we are seeing Hezbollah and others flex their muscles at this time?
They're flexing their muscles, but they're doing it in a fairly constrained manner. I think that they're just simply hoping that those threats will convince Hezbollah in the north and the Iranians as well. The Iranians got the Houthis to launch those cruise missiles and some drones, but Iran tends to be sort of standing back. I'm not sure that Iran wants to lose Hezbollah as a fighting organisation. The Israelis clearly have an overwhelming force organised in the north of Israel, but they really don't want another war up there. They would much rather prefer just to concentrate upon Gaza.
I hope you're right on that particular issue. I did want to ask you this because US President Joe Biden is reportedly asking Israel to delay any planned ground incursion into Gaza so that more work can be done to negotiate the release of hostages, although Israel denies this. Should a ground incursion be delayed, and what are the dangers involved in such an operation, and of course the likely ramifications?
There are a whole host of dangers. Depends on the size of how big the ground invasion is. We appear to be seeing the start of raids, if you like, into Gaza, and there may be some stepped-up raids during the nights coming. Raids aimed at killing Hamas leaders and possibly rescuing some of the hostages. Then after that, you could possibly see that a fairly major ground incursion into the north of Gaza. The Israeli Foreign Minister is talking about annexing parts of Gaza after this ends. It's possible that they may, say, annex Gaza City and push everybody down south into the southern part of the Gaza Strip. That simply highlights that the problem is that before there's a ground war, you would expect that the Israelis would know how the ground war will end and what peace they want after the war. At the present time, we have no idea of the peace after the war. The Israelis are simply saying that they will destroy Hamas. But when Hamas goes, there's probably a dozen other groups who will take their place. So that doesn't seem a terribly useful ground war aim. On the other hand, President Biden has once again spoken about a two-state solution. The president's obviously thinking about solving the longer-term problem. The Israelis are very much focused upon short-term revenge.
Right, because this is going to ultimately need a political solution. A military solution is not going to cut it, is it? I mean, we've seen this play out a number of times, maybe not at this level, but you touched on this. Israel's mission right now, of course, being to wipe out Hamas, both militarily and politically. But how achievable is that, and what are the dangers of radicalizing other bad actors to fill that vacuum? And of course, what's the likely goal of Hamas in all of this too? Because there's what's it planning? Why did it do this?
All those issues rise up, I think, now. I think the chances of destroying Hamas totally it is very unlikely. It will certainly, Israel can certainly kill a lot of Hamas leaders and a lot of the Hamas soldiers, but they're hiding amongst 2 million people. That's a lot of people who could join other Hamas-like groups. As you say, all this has been going on for a very long time. Some would say since 1948, or at least since 1967. So a political solution is required for it to end, but the Israelis show no signs of wishing to, in fact, do that. In fact, in the occupied territories, on the West Bank there, this year has been a rather horrid year, let's say. I think there's about 250 Palestinians have been killed. So that's roughly sort of one a day. So there's a lot of tension there as well. So the 5 million Palestinians are, if you like, angry and annoyed. It's going to be a very difficult war to end in that military sense. A political solution is surely the only game in town, but there's no sign of it yet from the Israeli side.
All right, Peter Layton, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your analysis and perspective on all of this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Well, aid workers are warning the situation in Gaza has become a humanitarian catastrophe. The Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health says more than 4,600 people have been killed in the besieged enclave since the war started. Among them, 1,000 women and nearly 2,000 children. Rights groups fear an Israeli ground incursion would increase those casualties dramatically. The Israel Defense Forces dropped these flyers on Saturday in a neighborhood in Gaza City, warning residents that if they choose not to evacuate to the south of Gaza, they, quote, might be considered as a partner for the terrorist organization. However, Palestinian author and journalist Layla El-Haddad tells CNN that some residents will never leave their homes.
They were aghast. My cousin's wife, Fidat, sent me a video rocking her infant twins and said, so now we're essentially being told that either we leave our home by force and get displaced and join, a million others in tents without food or access to water, or we're terrorists. She literally had no words, and she said, we're not leaving. We're going to stay right here and die in the dignity of our own homes.
As the situation worsens in Gaza, some parents are resorting to heartbreaking measures for their children, warning the images you're about to see are graphic. They are writing their children's names on their legs so they can be identified if the parents or the children are killed. A CNN photographer captured these gut-wrenching images of dead children with names written on their legs. Well, meantime, some relief aid trucks are arriving in Gaza, but they don't include fuel. At least 14 humanitarian relief trucks, sponsored by the Egyptian Red Crescent and the UN, entered Gaza from the Rafah crossing on Sunday, carrying food and medicine. But officials say it's not enough to meet the needs of the people.
20 trucks of aid to Gaza will not change much. Gaza needs at least 500 trucks daily of fuel, food, medicines and water. As a matter of fact, for 14 days Gaza got nothing under the Israeli siege. And its immediate need now is 7,000 trucks.
And earlier I spoke with Tamara Al-Rafai, Director of External Relations and Communications with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. And she says the situation in Gaza is dire and they desperately need fuel.
Over the last 2 days, 2 convoys of humanitarian assistance managed to go into Gaza. We're talking about 20 trucks the day before yesterday and 14 trucks overnight this morning. However, these trucks really only contain a fraction of what is needed given the immense humanitarian needs, particularly amongst the 400 or more than 400,000 people displaced in schools that have become shelters. These are usually schools that UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, runs and where it hosts little girls and boys. These have now become overcrowded shelters with no privacy, no locks, one toilet for several hundred or even thousand people. Situation very, very dire. So 20 and 14 trucks is a welcome gesture. But as a reminder, before this conflict, over 100 trucks of humanitarian aid and fuel used to come in. And here I really must insist on the fuel. No fuel has come into Gaza for the last 2 weeks. And without fuel, it's not going to be possible to go around Gaza in our trucks and distribute assistance, or to power the water desalination plants and get clean drinking water, or to power hospitals and their life-saving machines. We've just seen, you've just shown how the health system is on the brink of collapse. We need fuel. That is very, very urgent as water and food.
And of course, the IDF says it's not allowing fuel in because it's concerned that Hamas will take it as it has in the past. So I did want to ask you, though, when you expect more humanitarian aid to get into Gaza via the Rafah crossing, and what's the process involved in rationing out what is available right now until more supplies enter the war-torn region?
It's really a very strict rationing. It's even counting the minimum required calories per person per day for survival. That is how dire it is, and that is how little that access of humanitarian assistance is. So we are really counting on a continuous and unimpeded access of the trucks from Rafah into Gaza. But again, these trucks have to contain fuel, water, food, and urgently needed medical supplies, and the flow has to be a big flow, not just a trickle of 10 or tens even of trucks a day.
Still to come, what we know about this, the so-called Hamas hostage handbook, and what it tells us about the risks to those still being held by the militant group. We're back with that and more in just a moment.
If you have moderate to severe Crohn's disease, Skyrizi is the first and only IL-23 inhibitor that can deliver clinical remission and endoscopic improvement.
Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or
Defense forces insist an incursion is imminent. Well, the Israeli president told CNN that his country's army has recovered a hostage-taking handbook from Hamas. That discovery, of course, comes in the aftermath of the surprise attack on Israel on October 7th. Perhaps the most revealing part of this manual is the idea that Hamas was never supposed to bring the hostages into Gaza. Israel's president described the pamphlet as a detailed how-to guide for taking hostages.
This booklet is instruction guide how to go into a civilian premises, into a kibbutz, a city, a moshav, how to break in. And first thing, what do you do when you find the citizens? You torture them. This is the booklet. It says exactly how to torture them, how to abduct them, how to kidnap them.
Joining me is Graham Wood. He's a staff writer for The Atlantic and the author of the book The Way of the Strangers, Encounters with the Islamic State. Appreciate you joining us.
Glad to be here.
So in a recent article, you write that Hamas's hostage-taking handbook that we just heard about says to kill the difficult ones and use hostages as human shields. And you received that document from an official in the Israel Defense Forces. What else does that chilling document reveal about how Hamas might be treating the more than 200 hostages that they're currently holding inside Gaza?
Yeah, so the document which I received from the IDF and through other sources, in fact, other sources gave me parts of that document that the IDF didn't. It does describe a program of hostage taking. I mean, it was clear from that in black and white that there was an expectation that they would be able to take hostages and that they would treat them with brutality from the start. I mean, the document says, for example, that you should identify the problematic ones, the ones who might resist, and kill them first. You should separate the women and children from the men, and you should remove any implement that they might be able to use to kill themselves. So it also says to force them into compliance with electric shocks. But as you say, the really surprising thing about the document is that the game plan that it describes is actually not what happened. I mean, Hamas may have planned to take hostages into Gaza, but the documents describes having a standoff, almost certainly that it was supposed to take place in Israeli territory. So they, I think, were probably surprised at their great fortune that they were able to get so many hostages and bring them back to Gaza, where they have even more leeway with how they can handle them.
So given what the handbook said about that, is there any idea as to why they changed their plan and instead of keeping them in some of these kibbutz homes, they took them back to Gaza? Why, anyone understand why that was changed?
I think it's pretty straightforward, actually. I mean, they didn't expect, nor did Israel expect, that when they went into Israeli territory, they would have the run of the place for so long. I mean, it was shocking, I think, to Israelis that it took hours. I mean, like 12 hours for them to have a full response from the IDF. So when Hamas went there, I think they expected they would have the full fury of a modern military coming after them. But they actually had hours of leisure when they could do what they wished on site. And during that time, I'm sure it was pretty obvious to them that they would rather not have a prolonged standoff in Israeli territory when they can just take everybody back, hundreds of people back, and have them in Gaza territory instead.
And I did want to just raise a point, because Israel's president also claimed that document contained directions and instructions for the manufacture of chemical weapons. Have you heard any more on that?
Yes, I have seen the documents that are pertain to chemical weapons, and I must say that these documents are strange. I've discussed them with chemists, and I'm assured that the chemical weapons that are described are the most primitive and least likely to work. So this, I think, is a document, the chemical weapons document is an expression of aspiration rather than a fully fledged plan to kill large numbers of people with terrible corrosive poisonous gases or whatever. It's still alarming that anyone would try to do this, but unlike the hostage manual, it's not describing something that was anywhere close to being able to be taken to fruition.
Our thanks to Graham Wood joining us last hour. World leaders are working to solve this crisis, but the latest assessment from the Chinese envoy on the ground in the region is not optimistic. A live report from Hong Kong next.
Messy happens. When it does, there's HomeAglow. For just $19, HomeAglow will clean your entire house. Everything from dishes to vacuuming, even laundry. Join thousands of Americans and book your first cleaning today for just $19.
Verizon Small Business Days are back from October 16th to the 22nd. Get a free tech check and special offers like a free 5G phone. Plus, switch, keep your number, and get up to $300 off with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon.
Sustainably caught salmon in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
consider the flu to be a serious illness, but it can lead to severe complications, hospitalization, and even death. The Canadian Lung Association reminds you that getting your annual flu shot is the best defense against the flu. The flu shot is recommended for everyone over 6 months of age. It's especially important to get vaccinated if you or a family member is living with chronic lung disease. If you have any questions about flu or the flu vaccine, speak to your pharmacist, family doctor, or nurse practitioner.
They put food on our tables, care for our loved ones, and help build our communities. Canada needs over 400,000 migrant workers to fill employment gaps and sustain our growing economy. Mosaic BC's Migrant Workers Program provides support services to migrant workers, but more needs to be done. Like many others, migrant workers also lost their jobs during the BC wildfires. Emergency funding is required to support worker needs. Help give back to these workers who give so much to Canada. Donate today at mosaicbc.org.
Closed captioning brought to you by InventHelp. Call 1-800-710-0020.
Do you have an invention idea but don't know what to do next? Call InventHelp today. They can help you get started with your idea.
Call now. 800-710-0020.
More on our top story this hour, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The Israel Defense Forces say 320 terror targets were struck in Gaza overnight, including tunnels and dozens of operational command centers belonging to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Palestinian doctors and military officials say dozens were killed. Hamas fighters and Israeli forces also engaged in limited clashes inside Gaza on Sunday. Meantime, at least 14 humanitarian relief trucks entered the Gaza Strip from Egypt Sunday through the Rafah border crossing. The convoy carried food and medicine. These trucks arrived a day after a convoy of 20 Egyptian trucks unloaded humanitarian aid in Gaza using the same crossing. Well, China's special envoy to the Middle East says the situation in Gaza is severe and the risk of a large-scale ground conflict is rising significantly. According to Chinese state media, Jai Jun warned of armed conflicts spreading along Israel's borders with Lebanon and Syria. Jai is visiting the region this week to promote peace talks and push for a ceasefire. And CNN's Christy Lustout joins me now live from Hong Kong to talk more on this. So, Christy, what is expected to come out of this Middle East visit by China's envoy?
Well, China's envoy for Middle East affairs is in the region to push for peace. Jai Jun says that China is willing to do, quote, whatever is conducive to promote dialogue, to reach a ceasefire, and to restore peace. He also adds that the risk of a large-scale ground conflict in Gaza is, quote, significantly rising. Look, China wants to present itself as a neutral mediator, but China has deep economic interests in the Middle East that it wants to safeguard, especially access to energy, access to oil and gas. Now, on Saturday, that was when Jai was in Egypt, and he made remarks at the Cairo Summit for Peace. Jai has visited Egypt and Qatar. He is also visiting the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and other countries in the region. And Jai says this. He says China has provided and will continue to provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians through UN channels, through bilateral channels, and that China wants to promote a two-state solution. Now, according to a foreign ministry readout of the Cairo summit, we have it, let's bring it up for you. It reads as follows, quote, to end the cycle of the conflict between Palestine and Israel, it is essential to implement the two-state solution, establish an independent state of Palestine, and realize peaceful coexistence between Palestine and Israel, unquote. And this is what we heard last week from Chinese leader Xi Jinping. On Thursday, it was his first public comment since the war broke out. She called for a two-state solution, and he called it, quote, the fundamental way out. Now, what have we not heard from China? We have not heard any condemnation of Hamas. China has refrained from condemning Hamas for its brutal and coordinated terror attack on Israel on October the 7th, and that has prompted anger and disappointment from Israel. It's also prompted criticism from the U.S. Back to you.
All right, thanks to Christy Lustout joining us live from Hong Kong. And coming up, some of the other headlines we're following here on CNN, including the latest on the leaderless House of Representatives in the United States. How long can the political dysfunction last? We'll take a look.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines. The day's biggest stories, the night's most essential reporting. This is the new CNN Prime Time, weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
This couple spent 10 more minutes in bed thanks to Roman. With Roman, you can take care of erectile dysfunction conveniently and discreetly. Because sometimes everything else can wait. Get started at ro.co/Roman.
Verizon Small Business Days are back from October 16th to the 22nd. Get a free tech check and special offers like a free 5G phone. Plus, switch, keep your number, and get up to $300 off with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon.
When you're ready to begin treatment for chronic lymphocytic leukemia, Calquence helps you do the fighting, and you can do the exploring. You can do the splashing, the sightseeing, and the playing. Calquence is an oral targeted therapy for CLL. More patients begin with Calquence than any treatment of its kind, and Calquence is proven to work better than chemoimmunotherapy in patients with previously untreated CLL. Calquence may cause serious side effects which may lead to death. These include serious infections with fever, chills, or flu-like symptoms, and bleeding problems that may increase with blood thinners. Decreased blood counts are common and can be severe. New cancers have happened, including skin cancers. Heart rhythm problems with fast or irregular heartbeat, dizziness, feeling faint, chest discomfort, or shortness of breath have happened. Tell your doctor if you have bleeding, heart rhythm or liver problems, infection, or if you are or plan to be pregnant or breastfeeding. Calquence helps you do the fighting, and you can focus on the things you're loving. Ask your doctor if Calquence is right for you.
A time when Cybertron was rich with energy, and all the bots who lived on the planet were at peace with each other. It was also a time when I was very, very young.
Welcome back, everyone. We will return to CNN's coverage of Israel at war in just a moment, but let's take a look at some of the other headlines we're following this hour. A Detroit synagogue leader who was killed over the weekend is being mourned by her friends and family. Samantha Wall was found stabbed to death outside her home. Police say they discovered a trail of blood leading to the home where they believe the crime happened. At a memorial service Sunday, Wall was remembered as a model citizen who was endlessly positive and loved bridging divides.
Samantha Wall may have been the nicest person that I have ever met or will ever meet in my lifetime. Sam did more for our community, our state, our world, our lives, in her short time here on Earth than most will ever accomplish in 1,000 lifetimes over. And her killer will not rob us of the memory of her joy and warmth and kindness that she leaves behind.
Wall had led the Isaac Agree Synagogue in Detroit since 2022. The police chief says they are still investigating her death and they have no evidence to suggest it was motivated by anti-Semitism. In Washington, 9 Republicans have entered the high-stakes race for Speaker of the House of Representatives. They will make their case before the Republican conference later today after Jim Jordan failed 3 times to win the spot this past week. The House has been paralyzed without a Speaker for nearly 3 weeks, which ousted Speaker Kevin McCarthy calls embarrassing. With such a crowded field, it is unclear if any of the 9 candidates will secure the 217 votes needed to win the speakership. One standout is House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, who is endorsed by ex-Speaker Kevin McCarthy. However, given McCarthy's historic ouster, that may end up harming Emmer's chances. To discuss all of this is Jessica Levinson, law professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles and host of the Passing Judgment podcast. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
So 9 Republicans have now joined the race to become House Speaker after Representative Jim Jordan failed to get enough support and dropped out of the race. So how will this all play out, do you think? And who will likely get sufficient support if that's even possible?
I don't know if any of the 9 or any of the 217 that will have to vote for that person know that for sure, because I think the House truly still is in chaos. We've never had a situation like this where the House is without a speaker for 3 weeks because the speaker himself was ousted by his party, and then the next 2 in line could not garner the votes needed. So who's going to get this particular job? It's the person who can, and I don't know how many rounds it will take, but say to all of the factions of the Republican Party, we are going to lose in 2024 if we don't elect somebody. We need to do pressing things like vote on a budget, like vote on a resolution involving Hamas, like keep the government functioning. Our government is based on 3 branches, and half of one of the branches isn't functioning at all right now.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Because Republicans will select a nominee Monday and vote on the floor Tuesday. We don't know if they'll succeed in that. That's the plan. But as Republicans struggle to get this done, of course, the House remains paralyzed, unable to pass legislation on Israel's war with Gaza and Russia's war on Ukraine. So how likely is it that Republicans can get this done in time to help those parts of the world, but also before a looming government shutdown? There is so much at stake right here while the GOP dithers.
There's never a good time for the House of Representatives to grind to a halt, but this is a particularly precarious time. As you outlined, there are very serious issues with respect to foreign policy. We have the Ukraine crisis, we have the crisis in the Middle East, and of course November 17th, which truly is just around the corner, is when we need to pass a bill to keep the government open, to keep it functioning. And we know what happens if our federal government shuts down, and that truly would be a problem for many Americans. That is not an abstract concept. That would have concrete and really dire impacts. So who is it going to be, and how will this person garner the support? I think the person will really, again, have to explain that it not only looks like House Republicans are in chaos, but it's going to look like this to the voters, and that they're going to have to make compromises. I also think the person will have to be strong enough not to make promises that he or she cannot keep, because that really was part of Kevin McCarthy's downfall. He made so many promises to so many people, and they were competing and conflicting. He really could not make everybody happy.
And that was Jessica Levinson, law professor and host of the Passing Judgment podcast, talking to me last hour. Well, coming up next, we return to Israel to bring you a story of bravery and triumph that emerged from the October 7th terror attack. Back in just a moment.
Why choose between a longer life or quality of life? You deserve both. And with Kisqali, a treatment for people with metastatic breast cancer, you can have both. Kisqali is a pill that, when taken with an aromatase inhibitor, is the only treatment of its kind shown to both help people live longer and improve or preserve quality of life. Because you shouldn't have to sacrifice one for the other. Kisqali can cause lung problems or an abnormal heartbeat, which can lead to death. It can cause serious skin reactions, liver problems, and low white blood cell counts that may result in severe infections. Avoid grapefruit during treatment. Tell your doctor right away if you have new or worsening symptoms, including breathing problems, cough, chest pain, a change in your heartbeat, dizziness, yellowing of the skin or eyes, dark urine, tiredness, loss of appetite, abdomen pain, bleeding, bruising, fever, chills, or other symptoms of an infection, a severe or worsening rash, or plan to become pregnant or breastfeeding. Live longer and live well. Ask about Kisqali and long live you.
I wish for the amazing new iPhone 15 Pro.
Sean, you mean this one, the one with titanium? Switch to Verizon and get iPhone 15 Pro on them. Wow.
Get iPhone 15 Pro, Apple TV 4K, and 6 months of Apple One. All 3 on us. Only on Verizon.
Do not buy generic Viagra until you check out this program giving away 100 milligram generic Viagra for just 87 cents. CVS and Walgreens don't want you to know about this because they sell the same tablets for $30 to $40 each. Don't believe me? Look at this. This is from CVS. Look, 9 tablets, 100 milligrams sildenafil, aka generic Viagra, for $406. That's $45 a tablet. This is from Walgreens. $417 for 9 tablets of 100 milligrams sildenafil, or $46 a tablet. You can now get the same 9 tablets, the same 100 milligram strength, from Friday plans for just 87 cents each. To get generic Viagra from Friday plans, text MAIL, mail, to 69069. Once you text, they will send you a special link, and all you need to do is select why you need generic Viagra, the quantity you need, and the dosage. I'll pick 100 milligram, thank you very much. And then their system will see if you qualify. Give it a second to find the best deal, and boom! Look at that. 87 cents for each 100 milligram generic Viagra tablet. The prescription and shipping are free. Friday Plans delivers your medication in a plain white package just like this in 2 to 3 days. Once you open it, you'll find this inside. Each tablet comes individually wrapped, so you can tear one off and put it in your wallet. Guys, if you need generic Viagra, you need to take advantage of this program. Right now, Friday Plans is offering a special deal for new customers. $10 off your first package. The prescription is free, and the shipping is free as well. Do not wait. Text MAIL, mail, to 69069 today.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Page Publishing. Want to publish a book? We'll review your manuscript for free.
If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you.
Call 800-563-0741.
A group of brave volunteers managed to fight off more than 30 Hamas terrorists during that surprise attack just over 2 weeks ago. Incredibly, no one inside the small kibbutz in southern Israel was killed. CNN's Erin Burnett spoke with some of the heroes of this community.
You were at the gate. They tried to come in the vehicle gate, and I know in Barry we saw all the burnout cars they used to block. You were able to stop that, but they burst through the pedestrian gate. But we have footage of some of this from the security cameras.
Exactly. They were actually shooting anti-tank missiles on the gate. So there's an actual carnage going on outside the gate. People are trying to rush in from the party. People that were just driving.
They're trying to come in for safety.
Trying to come in. The gate is closed. They cannot see the terrorists, and they just go outside and run to the gate, and they're being shot at from short distance. Fall down.
So the terrorists at the gate are trying to come in. These people are rushing, so they basically they were just like picking them off as they run in.
Terrorists are actually taking cover around the gate from the outside
and firing at them.
And firing at those civilians that's running to the gate, stabbing them after they were shot down to make sure they're dead. They are engaging. There is a small unit, this bomb shelter, outside the gate. Some of the party members were hiding there. So you can see a group of terrorists going and doing their massacre there.
They throw hand grenades.
Grenades into the shelter.
Yeah. You can see in the movie, the security movie, you can see the hand of the terrorist throw hand grenades inside. So I went out solo and starting moving towards the main gate, but not in a straight line. I mean, I went through the houses. I got to parking lot number 2, that is like on the, and there is a small hill overwatching it, but from outside. And there were 3 guys wearing black, looking at the road. I wasn't sure if this is our people or maybe I don't know what. And at the moment they turned around, I saw AK-47s. So
that's how you know, because you all have M16s.
Yes.
All of you.
We don't use AK-47.
Right. So when you know,
That's not
immediate
us.
signal that
Yeah, that's not us. I shot at this group. One of them got hit. The other two scattered.
Do you have any idea how many? I mean, obviously, you have M16s, you have magazines, but just a sense of this went on for hours. How many bullets did you even shoot? I mean, do you have any even idea of what this took? You know?
Hundreds. I shot 240 bullets.
I knew that I have only 6 magazines, and I counted every bullet. I knew that I cannot shoot like I have a backup or something like that. So I've been shooting every bullet has its own target. I didn't just to make them lie.
Right. You had to shoot. You had to shoot to kill.
I had to shoot to kill.
So I know you all know you've seen these. This is what was found on them. I mean, at least on somebody, right? This is their plans. I mean, of what they were going to do. I just was reading through it. I mean, it's dated October 2022. They were, I mean, if that they were planning it for a whole year. The details in here. Ellie, I wanted to ask you about one specific thing. I mean, they knew everything about your...
Except our names.
Yeah, except your name. But they put their phone numbers in here. They put, you know, the task, kibbutz, mafasim, raid plan, B-14. I mean, it's military.
Very specified, very military.
God is great, the martyr, Al-Qassam brigades, they label it all. But at the top, they have, you know, the cameras that are going to be visible, who is going to come to help you. They knew the tank brigade. But it's this part I wanted to ask you all about. This was exactly what they planned to do inside the kibbutz. The duty of where they were supposed to go, what street numbers, everything.
They know where the generator is, there's a mentioning here.
And did you now that you see this and you saw them, were they trying to execute this plan? Exactly.
Their plan was actually to engage the security group, to open the main gate to allow vehicles in, to sabotage the main power and the generator, and to make as much casualties from the security team, to allow the second wave to go in. And the fact that they know the exact street where to go to, where the generator is, and it's stated.
Yeah, I mean, it's street by street.
Street by street. That's exactly what they were executing. Exactly. They came to the exact points where the gates are. For instance, the point beside my house is the gate. It's the southern gate. It's a small gate that is closed. It's in the plan. I actually saw a page.
Which I saw too with symbols like
actually arrows.
Gate.
When you sit here now and you think about it, that they didn't just plan and train. I mean, this is military. I mean, this is. How do you even react to that? This took.
It's
the
terrifying.
date's October 2022.
It's terrifying because it is a military plan that the combatants, the terrorists trained on it. It was quite clear they knew exactly what they are doing. They were disciplined. This is a military grade planning.
And that was CNN's Erin Burnett reporting there. I want to thank you for joining us this hour. I'm Rosemary Church. I will be back with more news in just a moment. Do stay with us.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines. The day's biggest stories. The night's most essential reporting. This is the new CNN Prime Time. Weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
This couple spent 10 more minutes in bed thanks to Roman. With Roman, you can take care of erectile dysfunction conveniently and discreetly. Because sometimes everything else can wait. Get started at ro.co/Roman.
Businesses need 5G solutions today. That's why they choose T-Mobile for Business. MLB partners with T-Mobile to not only enhance the fan experience, but to advance how the game is played. AAA relies on T-Mobile's network to stay connected nationwide so they can help get their members back on the road. And we're helping Pano AI innovate to stop the spread of wildfires. Now's the time to see what America's largest 5G network can do for your business.
Verizon Small Business Days are back from October 16th to the 22nd. Get a free tech check and special offers like a free 5G phone. Plus, switch, keep your number, and get up to $300 off with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon.
My active psoriatic arthritis can make me feel like I'm losing my rhythm. With Skyrizi to treat my skin and joints, I'm getting into my groove. Along with significantly clearer skin, Skyrizi helps me move with less joint pain, stiffness, swelling, and fatigue. And is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses. Skyrizi attaches to and reduces a source of excess inflammation that can lead to skin and joint symptoms. With Skyrizi, 90% clearer skin and less joint pain are possible.
Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, had a vaccine, or plan to.
Thanks to Skyrizi, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement. And that means everything. Now's the time to ask your doctor about Skyrizi. Learn how AbbVie can help you save.
Discover the fine art of relaxation and rejuvenation. The perfect place to watch the world go by. Big waves, big smiles. There's always something to do. Just 10 minutes from downtown Victoria. Come for a day, a week, or forever. Come and play in Oak Bay, Victoria's seaside destination.
1 in 3 children is now at risk of going to school on an empty stomach.
When I'm hungry, my stomach starts to hurt a little bit. It's hard to think and concentrate. I don't have enough energy.
But there's hope. By supporting Toonies for Tummies, 100% of your donation gives hungry children in your community the chance to start their day with a much-needed nutritious meal.
When I eat breakfast, I have lots of energy. When it's gym, I can run really fast.
Donate online today.
Hello and welcome to our viewers joining us here in the United States and all around the world as we continue our coverage of Israel at war. I'm Rosemary Church. Well, Israel's military says more than 300 targets were hit overnight by airstrikes in Gaza. According to the IDF, tunnels and operational command centers belonging to Hamas and Islamic Jihad were impacted. Israeli forces say they also targeted sites that posed a threat to the forces preparing for ground operations. Meantime, a senior Israeli official tells CNN there will be no ceasefire as they continue attempts to arrange hostage release, saying humanitarian efforts cannot interfere with the mission to dismantle Hamas. And the country's defense minister says Hamas will cease to exist soon.
This needs to be the last maneuvering inside Gaza, due to the simple reason that Hamas will cease to exist. It might take a month, 2, but eventually there will be no Hamas.
Journalist Elliot Gotkin joins me now live from London. Good to see you, Elliot. So we are seeing an increase in Israeli airstrikes in northern Gaza. What is the latest on that? And what more are you learning about this imminent ground incursion?
Rosemary, Israel said it was going to be ramping up its airstrikes against militant targets inside the Gaza Strip, and to that extent it's been true to its word. And so we've seen, as you were just mentioning in the introduction there, more than 320 military targets, according to the IDF, have been struck over the past day. This could be the largest number in any one-day period. We're waiting for confirmation of that from the IDF, and as you say, they've been targeting, according to the IDF, tunnels, operational command centers, some of which contained militants from Islamic Jihad and Hamas, military compounds, observation posts, and also anti-tank missile cells as well. And on top of that, it's been targeting, it's been hitting targets that it says poses a threat to its troops that are preparing for a ground invasion. Now, we've already seen the first skirmishes, the first clashes between the IDF and Hamas militants inside the Gaza Strip since Israel started airstrikes in the wake of Hamas's terrorist attack of October the 7th. In that clash, one IDF soldier was killed and 3 were injured when an anti-tank missile hit the vehicle that they were in. Hamas saying that it destroyed a couple of bulldozers and a tank. So clashes have already begun, but it doesn't necessarily signal the starting gun to a full-blown ground invasion. We do expect that ground invasion to happen. Israel has said it is going to happen. The only question is when it's going to happen.
And Elliot, US President Joe Biden is reportedly asking Israel to delay its ground incursion into Gaza so that more work can be done to negotiate the release of hostages. Any sign that will happen, and how much influence does the US have on an issue like this?
The US has more influence over Israel than any other nation, but ultimately, as Secretary of State Antony Blinken was saying in response to questions on this matter, it's really a decision in the end for the Israelis. Now, we know that the ground invasion certainly would have been delayed by the visit of President Biden to Israel. Israel was never going to go in while the President of the United States was in town. Now, why is there still what seems to be a delay? There could be a number of reasons. One could be the US leaning on Israel in order to do so, as we understand, in order to help facilitate more humanitarian aid to go into the Gaza Strip and to try to negotiate the release of more hostages that Hamas took. It's still holding more than 200. We saw 2 Israeli Americans released on Friday. So those are some of the reasons. Other reasons could be the weather. Israel also, of course, constantly gathering intelligence to understand better the layout of Hamas's network of tunnels underground, and also trying to gather intelligence as to where its hostages are and where bodies are as well of people that were taken from Israel into the Gaza Strip on October the 7th. But when he was asked himself, President Biden, when he was asked as to the possibility of the US leaning on Israel to delay a ground invasion, his response was simply, I'm talking to the Israelis. So not much being given away by President Biden. There is still a flurry of diplomatic activity. Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu holding their 8th conversation over the weekend. President Biden also speaking with the Pope and a number of other world leaders. And in Israel today, we're expecting the French President and the Dutch Prime Minister to come to Israel to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu as well. No doubt the possibility of a ground invasion will also be one of the subjects under discussion. Rosemary?
Elliot Godkin with that live report from London. Many thanks. Well, CNN's Nick Robertson is in Sderot, near the border with Gaza, and has more on the next stages of the war.
Bristling with battle-ready troops, farmers' fields north of Gaza churn with the controlled fury of a nation readying for an incursion to strike Hamas. Yet they are waiting with no explanation why. It feels like the early rush for battle readiness has passed. The troops are deployed, standing by. The question is, how long can they be kept out here? According to former IDF General Israel Ziv, as long as is needed, there are military gains.
We are now improving our intelligence and our capacity of targets.
But the political calculation here is more complicated.
I think both in Washington and in Jerusalem, they understand that the legitimization window is closing quickly.
Civilian losses in Gaza are growing. More than a third of them children, according to Palestinian health officials. Lengthy negotiations have led to 2 American hostages released, as a tiny amount of humanitarian aid has crossed into Gaza that Israel fears ends up in Hamas's hands. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's calculus of when to send in ground troops has never been so fraught, under pressure from the White House for more hostage releases.
Netanyahu is in real problem. He cannot say no to Biden, but he cannot say yes to the humanitarian aid that drifts into northern Gaza.
But he is also under pressure at home too. Military and others hawkish for a decisive blow against Hamas.
We are finishing preparing, the ground force because we've changed plans. We are going to for heavy maneuvering.
Netanyahu's dilemma compounded by his dependence on American weapons.
The pressure is from Washington is real. Is real and strong, and the Prime Minister says many times to his ministers, listen, we are getting from the United States more than you know.
Where less than a week ago these fields were teeming with tanks, troops making last-minute repairs. Today there are just tracks in the sand. There's a soldier's jacket here, bread in a bag on the table. The question is, where have all the tanks gone? Forward for an incursion, or back to base for a pause? Close to the front line in Gaza these days, more questions than answers. An incursion still highly probable, but when? Nick Robertson, CNN, Sderot, Israel.
Some relief aid trucks are arriving in Gaza, but they don't include fuel. At least 14 humanitarian relief trucks, sponsored by the Egyptian Red Crescent and the UN, entered Gaza from the Rafah crossing on Sunday evening, carrying food and medicine. But officials say it's not enough to meet the needs of the people. CNN's Scott McLean has more now on the situation in Gaza. A warning, though, his report contains graphic images.
Those who arrived at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza alive are the lucky ones. There were 5 airstrikes this morning near the hospital. This video shows the smoke from one rising nearby. Some 110 bodies were brought here overnight and this morning, one medical source tells CNN. The morgue is now full. The rest of the bodies, wrapped in white sheets, now lay outside in the heat of the day. Relatives try to identify their loved ones. Finding them confirms their worst fears. Inside the hospital, children, including a toddler, are among the dead. Several of these victims were found with their names written in Arabic on their legs, an increasingly common marking as parents try to make identification easier if they or their kids are killed. This hospital is located outside of the area of northern Gaza that Israel has been trying to get civilians to evacuate. On Saturday, the IDF dropped leaflets telling people that everyone who chose to not evacuate from the north of the Strip to the south of Wadi Gaza might be considered as a partner for the terrorist organization. In a statement, the IDF confirmed it dropped the leaflets, but said it has no intention to consider those who have not evacuated from the affected area of fighting as a member of the terrorist group. Even those who have managed to avoid the bombs are not out of danger. A trickle of aid, 20 trucks, were allowed to cross the Rafah border crossing from Egypt on Saturday, but that's a tiny fraction of what is needed.
20 trucks of aid to Gaza will not change much. Gaza needs at least 500 trucks daily of fuel, food, medicines, and water. As a matter of fact, for 14 days, Gaza got nothing under the Israeli siege. And its immediate need now is 7,000 trucks.
Satellite images show dozens of trucks waiting at the border and dozens more a quarter-mile down the road, all unable to get in. Aid groups say that the death toll could skyrocket because of disease and hospitals that are overwhelmed and undersupplied. With no electricity or generator, this shopkeeper in central Gaza is keeping the store open by candlelight as the shelves look increasingly bare. The World Food Program says the shortage of basic supplies is pushing Gaza to the edge of catastrophe. The IDF says it killed dozens of terrorists overnight, but vows that the number of airstrikes will only increase ahead of an expected ground operation. Meanwhile, conditions for the people of Gaza worsen by the hour. Scott McLean, CNN, London.
We want to talk more about this. Joining me from Cairo, Egypt, is Abir Etefa, Senior Spokesperson for the Middle East, North Africa and Eastern Europe for the World Food Programme. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So Israeli airstrikes are ramping up, apparently in preparation for the next stage of its military operation in Gaza. And this as humanitarian trucks entered the territory Sunday after moving through the Rafah crossing from Egypt. What is the current situation on the ground in the territory, given this aid is just a fraction of what's needed?
Well, conditions in Gaza are desperate. Food and water supplies are really running low. Shelters for the displaced people are becoming massively overcrowded. And also there is a massive shortage of fuel, which is crippling Gaza Strip. Health services are collapsing. And for the last 2 days, yes, convoys have been rolling into Gaza, which is a glimpse of hope. And WFP welcomes the opening of the Rafah border crossing point for the humanitarian convoys. But that's basically a drop in the ocean. For every truck that has entered Gaza, 14 more are still waiting outside. For every person that WFP is providing assistance to, there are at least 6 more who are in desperate need. So there is, a good movement, but we need much, much more. And, we are really calling for sustained access, something that's continuing on daily basis with huge quantities, because what is coming through is hardly enough for the needs that we're seeing inside Gaza.
And do you have any idea when more humanitarian aid will get into Gaza, and how are you distributing the supplies that you currently have?
Well, right now I think there is a rhythm of around yesterday there were around 14, the day before were 20, so we're still in this movement of the double digits, but I think we really need much more to be able to meet the needs. As far as food supplies, we're providing canned food, ready-to-eat food, because people don't have the ability to cook, there is no fuel, and of course people are in shelters, they have lost their homes, so the food go from the trucks to warehouses and immediately are distributed in the shelters to the people that need it. So for the first day, I think almost 280,000 people have had their dinner of canned tuna that came on the first convoy. The situation, as I described, it's really desperate, and I think desperate, times call for desperate measures. So we really want to have more access and, less bureaucratic hurdles, more capacity to get these trucks inside. And I think I understand the road conditions, the situation inside Gaza itself is very difficult. The reality is that, yes, you can also get food through the border, but you need to have safe passage from one area to the other to be able to provide these supplies inside Gaza.
Yeah, let's hope progress is made in the coming hours on that point. I did want to ask you about what's happening right now in Gaza's hospitals, given Israel has cut off critical supplies, including fuel that would run their generators.
Well, fuel is an essential commodity for everything. It's for the hospitals, for the bakeries. Our bakeries are running out of fuel. I think there are only few remaining ones, to the extent that one bakery would support around 130,000 people. Situation in hospitals, of course, is as desperate as we have seen on television screens. It's basically the only way that you can run the medical equipment. But from my end, as the World Food Program, I can tell you it's having a huge impact on our operations in terms of trucks moving on the roads, as well as, the bakeries working and the shops being able to operate.
Abia Etefa, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And when we return, we will show you some of the worldwide demonstrations in support of Palestinians that took place on Sunday. Back with that and more in just a moment.
My name's Eric. I am 39 years old. I've started thinking about getting Botox Cosmetic for the last couple of years. I just see myself on video calls all day, and I really started noticing the lines. I'm still Eric, and I got Botox Cosmetic. I'm seeing a lot less prominent lines than I did before. The results have been subtle but noticeable. Botox Cosmetic is FDA approved to temporarily make frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better. The effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Do not receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow, eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Tell your doctor about your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, and medications including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Internet from T-Mobile. It only costs $50 at T-Mobile. They won't raise your rates at T-Mobile. You'll get a great deal every day.
Moderate to severe eczema still disrupts my skin. Despite treatment, it disrupts my skin with itch. It disrupts my skin with rash. But now, I can disrupt eczema with Rinvoq. Rinvoq is not a steroid, topical, or injection. It's one pill once a day. Many taking Rinvoq saw clear or almost clear skin, while some saw up to 100% clear skin. And they felt dramatic and fast itch relief, some as early as 2 days. That's Rinvoq Relief.
Rinvoq can lower your ability to fight infections, including TB, serious infections and blood clots, some fatal, cancers, including lymphoma and skin cancer. Death, heart attack, stroke, and tears in the stomach or intestines occurred. People 50 and older with at least one heart disease risk factor have higher risks. Don't take if allergic to Rinvoq, as serious reactions can occur. Tell your doctor if you are or may become pregnant.
Disrupt the itch and rash of eczema. Talk to your doctor about Rinvoq.
Learn how AbbVie can help you save.
I know the challenges you face, the workforce uncertainties that keep you up at night. The economy is volatile, recession is inevitable, AI is disruptive. 325,000 CEOs, HR leaders, and politicos turn to SHRM. 95% of all Fortune 500 companies turn to SHRM.
When work keeps you up at night, turn to SHRM.
Teeth sensitivity is so common. It immediately feels like somebody's poking directly on the nerve. I recommend Sensodyne. Sensodyne toothpaste goes inside the tooth and calms the nerve down. And my patients say, you know, doc, it really works.
Sustainably caught salmon in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
Thousands of people in cities around the world marched Sunday in support of Palestinians.
Free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
This was the scene in Brussels where demonstrators outside the European Commission headquarters called for a ceasefire. And in Bosnia-Herzegovina, huge crowds gathered in Sarajevo. They waved Palestinian and Bosnian flags and also called for a halt to Israeli military operations in Gaza. The French President and Dutch Prime Minister are expected to visit Israel in the coming hours. According to the Israeli Prime Minister's office, Emmanuel Macron and Mark Rutte will arrive in Israel today, where they will meet with Benjamin Netanyahu. Other European leaders joined the US and Canada in a joint statement on the conflict. They affirmed support for Israel and also called for adherence to humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians. US President Joe Biden has been working the phones this weekend, making calls to world leaders in an effort to keep the conflict from spreading. CNN White House reporter Priscilla Alvarez has details.
President Biden made calls to multiple world leaders on Sunday as a potential invasion of Gaza looms. Now, the president spoke with leaders of Canada and Europe, as well as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, according to a White House readout, the two leaders discussed developments in Israel and Gaza, as well as President Biden affirming the flow of critical assistance to Gaza And the two also discussed ongoing efforts to release hostages. Now, this is the 8th call between the two leaders since the terror attacks on October 7th. Of course, all of these calls come on the heels of President Biden's trip to Israel in the past week, as well as ongoing efforts by U.S. officials to get that necessary assistance to Gaza and trying to get the release of additional hostages being held by Hamas. Now, while here in Rehoboth, the president was asked whether the U.S. is encouraging Israel to delay an invasion, and to that, President Biden said that he is only speaking to Israel. Now, U.S. officials maintain that it is ultimately Israel's decision as how they move forward, but that it is important, and they stress that innocent civilians are protected and that assistance can get to Gaza. President Biden staying close with his national security team over the course of the weekend as all of this unfolds. Priscilla Alvarez, CNN, traveling with the president.
China's special envoy to the Middle East says the situation in Gaza is severe and the risk of a large-scale ground conflict is rising significantly. According to Chinese state media, Jai Jun warned of armed conflicts spreading along Israel's borders with Lebanon and Syria. Jai is visiting the region this week to promote peace talks and push for a ceasefire. CNN's Christy Lustow joins me now live from London with more on this. So, Christy, what is expected to come out of this visit to the region by China's Middle East envoy?
Well, Rosemary, China's envoy for Middle East affairs is in the region to push for peace. Jai Jun says that China is willing to do, quote, whatever is conducive to promote talks, to reach a ceasefire, to restore peace. And he adds that the risk of a large-scale ground conflict in Gaza is, quote, significantly rising. China wants to present itself to the world as a neutral mediator, but China has deep economic interests in the Middle East that it wants to protect, especially access to energy like oil and gas. Now, on Saturday, Jai was in Egypt. He took part at the Cairo Summit for Peace and made remarks there. He's also visiting the UAE, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the region. And while in Egypt, Jai said that China has provided and will continue to provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians through UN channels and bilateral channels, but didn't specify what aid has been provided. And he also said that China wants to promote a two-state solution. Now, according to a foreign ministry readout of the Cairo Summit, we have it, let's bring it up for you. It reads as follows, quote, to end the cycle of the conflict between Palestine and Israel, it is essential to implement the two-state solution to establish an independent state of Palestine and realize peaceful coexistence between Palestine and Israel, unquote. And this was the messaging that we heard last week from Xi Jinping, the leader of China. It was his first public comments since the war broke out. And Xi on Thursday, he called for a two-state solution. He called it the fundamental way out. But it's important to note what we have yet to hear from China. We have yet to hear any condemnation of Hamas. China has refrained from condemning Hamas for that brutal and coordinated terror attack on Israel on October the 7th. And that has prompted anger, disappointment from Israel, as well as criticism elsewhere. Back to you.
Thanks to Christy Lustow for that live report. Appreciate it. And still to come, Israeli officials are urging more civilians near the northern border with Lebanon to leave. We will tell you why. Back in just a moment with that.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines. The day's biggest stories. The night's most essential reporting. This is the new CNN Prime Time. Weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
After Advil Dual Action Back Pain.
What? My back feels better.
Before Advil. Advil Dual Action Back Pain. Fights back pain 2 ways for 8 hours of relief.
I'm Sholay, and I lost 75 pounds with Golo. I went from a size 20 to a size 6. Before Golo, nothing seemed to work. I was exercising for over an hour every day. It was really discouraging. But Golo is so easy, the weight just falls off.
I wish for the amazing new iPhone 15 Pro. Sean!
Do you mean this one, the one with titanium? It's so light, don't touch it. Maybe stealing wishes from the birthday boy is not your best plan. Switch to Verizon and get iPhone 15 Pro on them.
What?
Yep, and on an amazing network.
And I don't have to ruin any more birthday parties.
Yeah, that ship has sailed. Let's go get you that iPhone. Here we go. Come on now.
Get iPhone 15 Pro, Apple TV 4K, and 6 months of Apple One. All 3 on us. Only on Verizon.
that unwelcome guest everyone wishes would just leave already? That's COVID-19. So I got this season's shot designed to keep up to date with recent variants. Got it?
I left the military with a traumatic brain injury. I came home to fight depression, anxiety, and alcohol.
As America's veterans face challenges, DAV is there.
I'm Adam Greathouse, Army veteran.
DAV helps veterans get the benefits they've earned.
With DAV's help, I've built a new life for myself.
With the right support, more veterans can reach victories great and small.
My victory is just experiencing life.
Support more victories for veterans. Go to DAV.org.
In time, the legs and arms find skill, the head finds purpose, and the heart finds courage. Strength in one thing becomes strength in all things. To change a life, just add play. Help empower Indigenous youth through sport and play. Visit justaddplay.ca. Spirit North.
Stop wasting money on plastic ties. Holding hands are reusable. Order now and get a 4-piece set of Ruby holding hands for just $9.99. Order right now and we'll send you 4 more absolutely free. That's 8 for just $9.99. But wait, this may be your last chance to get holding hands at this low price. Don't wait. Order now.
Call 1-800-448-0998. That's 1-800-448-0998. Or visit getholdinghands.com. So call 1-800-448-0998 now.
Israel Defense Forces say they struck 320 terror targets inside Gaza overnight, including dozens of operational command centers and tunnels belonging to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. The flurry of airstrikes comes ahead of a potential military incursion. Sources say the White House is urging Israel to delay any ground assault in order to allow for more possible hostage releases and for more humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. US President Joe Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone, and they agreed to a continued flow of aid to Gaza. Some trucks have entered the territory through the Rafah border crossing from Egypt, but aid groups say the humanitarian situation remains dire. The IDF says it struck a terrorist cell in Lebanon today that was planning to carry out an anti-tank missile launch in northern Israel. And as hostilities grow, Israeli officials say they will fund the evacuation of 14 additional communities near the Lebanese border, where many towns are already nearly empty. Matthew Chance has the story.
It's very quiet here in Kiryat Shimona at the moment in northern Israel, but that's mainly because the vast majority of the population of this city of more than 20,000 people, this town, have gone. They've been evacuated, and that's true of towns and villages all across this area close to the Lebanese border. There's been an order from the Israeli government for civilians to leave because of the growing threat of rocket attacks and other kinds of attacks from southern Lebanon, where Hamas controls the territory. Palestinian militant groups also operate in southern Lebanon as well. And indeed, the Israeli military say that those attacks have been increasing over the course of the past week or so, with, as you say, drone attacks taking place, or drone flights at least taking place across northern Israel from Lebanese territory, anti-tank missiles being fired at Israeli installations along the border. There have been infiltrations of gunmen from the Lebanese side into Israel. The Israelis have, of course, responded in kind. They've been pounding areas with artillery strikes and airstrikes inside southern Lebanon and in Syria as well. We're very close to the border with Syria also. And they are now warning Lebanon yet again, and warning Hezbollah, that if this continues or if it escalates, there will be a very strong response indeed from the Israeli military. They say they don't want a second front to open up, but as they're focusing on the south and as they prepare for that operation, that land operation in Gaza, but they have moved tens of thousands of troops at least into this region in preparation for what they say will be a very determined and strong and destructive response against Hezbollah and against Lebanon if the attacks from that southern part of the country persist or escalate.
The Israeli president told CNN that his country's army has recovered a hostage-taking handbook from Hamas. That discovery, of course, comes in the aftermath of the surprise attack on Israel on October 7th. Perhaps the most revealing part of this manual is the idea that Hamas was never supposed to bring the hostages back into Gaza. Israel's president described the pamphlet as a detailed how-to guide for taking hostages.
This booklet is instruction guide how to go into a civilian premises, into a kibbutz, a city, a moshav, how to break in. And first thing, what do you do when you find the citizens? You torture them. This is the booklet. It says exactly how to torture them, how to abduct them, how to kidnap them.
Joining me is Graham Wood. He's a staff writer for The Atlantic and the author of the book The Way of the Strangers, Encounters with the Islamic State. Appreciate you joining us.
Glad to be here.
So in a recent article, you write that Hamas's hostage-taking handbook that we just heard about says to kill the difficult ones and use hostages as human shields. And you received that document from an official in the Israel Defense Forces. What else does that chilling document reveal about how Hamas might be treating the more than 200 hostages that they're currently holding inside Gaza?
Yeah, so the document which I received from the IDF and through other sources, in fact, other sources gave me parts of that document that the IDF didn't. It does describe a program of hostage taking. I mean, it was clear from that in black and white that there was an expectation that they would be able to take hostages and that they would treat them with brutality from the start. I mean, the document says, for example, that you should identify the problematic ones, the ones who might resist, and kill them first. You should separate the women and children from the men, and you should remove any implement that they might be able to use to kill themselves. So it also says to force them into compliance with electric shocks. But as you say, the really surprising thing about the document is that the game plan that it describes is actually not what happened. I mean, Hamas may have planned to take hostages into Gaza, but the document describes having a standoff, almost certainly that was supposed to take place in Israeli territory. So they, I think, were probably surprised at their great fortune that they were able to get so many hostages and bring them back to Gaza, where they have even more leeway with how they can handle them.
So given what the handbook said about that, is there any idea as to why they changed their plan and instead of keeping them in some of these kibbutz homes, they took them back to Gaza? Anyone understand why that was changed?
I think it's pretty straightforward, actually. I mean, they didn't expect, nor did Israel expect, that when they went into Israeli territory, they would have the run of the place for so long. I mean, it was shocking, I think, to Israelis that it took hours. I mean, like 12 hours for them to have a full response from the IDF. So when Hamas went there, I think they expected they would have the full fury of a modern military coming after them. But they actually had hours of leisure when they could do what they wished on site. And during that time, I'm sure it was pretty obvious to them that they would rather not have a prolonged standoff in Israeli territory when they can just take everybody back, you know, hundreds of people back, and have them in Gaza territory instead.
And I did want to just raise a point, because Israel's president also claimed that that document contained directions and instructions for the manufacture of chemical weapons. Have you heard any more on that?
Yes, I have seen the documents that are pertain to chemical weapons, and I must say that these documents are strange. I've discussed them with chemists, and I'm assured that the chemical weapons that are described are the most primitive and least likely to work. So this, I think, is a document, the chemical weapons document is an expression of aspiration rather than a fully fledged plan to kill large numbers of people with you know, terrible corrosive poisonous gases or whatever. It's still alarming that anyone would try to do this, but it unlike the hostage manual, it's not describing something that was anywhere close to being able to be taken into fruition.
Our thanks to Graham Wood for joining us earlier. And we'll be right back.
Being a journalist is the best job in the world. Asking challenging questions of the folks who run the world.
Is Ukraine going to win this war?
Yes, of course. You ready?
The Lead with Jake Tapper, CNN, tomorrow at 4.
After Advil.
Feeling better?
On top of the world!
Before Advil. Advil targets pain at the source of inflammation. When pain comes for you, come back fast with Advil liquid gels.
Relapsing MS isn't the only thing I have going on. That's why I take Kesimpta. It's the only B-cell treatment for RMS I can take at home, once a month. Kesimpta was proven superior at reducing the rate of relapses, active lesions, and slowing disability progression versus Aubagio.
Don't take Kesimpta if you have hepatitis B, and tell your doctor if you have had it, as it could come back. Kesimpta can cause serious side effects, including infections. While no cases of PML were reported in RMS clinical trials, it could happen. Tell your doctor if you had or plan to have vaccines, or if you are or plan to become pregnant. Kesimpta may cause a decrease in some types of antibodies. The most common side effects are upper respiratory tract infection, headache, and injection reactions. Ask your doctor about treating RMS with Kesimpta.
Stanley Steamer is proud to clean over 1 million homes across America every year. With custom-made vans and cleaning equipment, our professional cleaning technicians have the knowledge and skills to get your home cleaner and healthier. Get the best for your home. Schedule a cleaning with your local Stanley Steamer today.
Dear humans, I stand here today not for myself, but for every tail wagger, sloppy kisser, and curtain ninja. I stand here for each one of the thousands of dogs and cats killed in shelters each day, asking you to join our cause and help us make sure every best friend has a chance to meet one of their own. With Best Friends Animal Society leading the charge, and your help, we can save them all.
Race car drivers change lanes very fast, but with no outside mirrors. How come they don't crash? Introducing Angel View, the new wide-angle mirror that reduces blind spots. Angel View simply snaps over your car's rear view mirror, giving you a 160-degree view behind you. Ordinary rear view mirrors are small and flat, but Angel View has a huge mirror with curved glass. This convex shape allows you to see both blind spots with one glance. And with our Pro Edition special coating, it's anti-glare at night. Get your Angel View now for just $19.99 through this special offer. But wait, this may be your last chance to get Angel View at this low price. There is a strict limit of 2 Angel Views per order while supplies last. Order now.
Call 1-800-373-1891. That's 1-800-373-1891. Or visit getangelview.com. So call 1-800-373-1891. Order now.
Welcome back to CNN Newsroom. I'm Rosemary Church. The Philippines has summoned the Chinese ambassador over a ship collision in a disputed area of the South China Sea. Both countries are blaming each other for Sunday's collision. The Philippines says the Chinese Coast Guard caused the collision by carrying out provocative blocking maneuvers, while China says it took appropriate action. The Philippines has ordered an investigation. In a statement, the U.S. State Department said that China violated international law by conducting dangerous maneuvers. A Detroit synagogue leader who was killed over the weekend is being mourned by friends and family members. At a memorial service Sunday, Samantha Woll was remembered as a model citizen who was endlessly positive and loved bridging divides. CNN's Omar Jimenez has more on her memorial and the investigation into her death.
Well, the headline alone is a cause for concern. Detroit synagogue leader found stabbed to death, and it's understandable why some may jump to quick conclusions, but it's exactly what Detroit police are cautioning against, at least at this stage in the investigation. Now, they have not announced an arrest of any suspect, and they have not announced a motive that they have found in this particular case, but over the course of Sunday, the Detroit police chief put out a statement that read in part that while the investigation into the death of Miss Samantha Woll remains ongoing, at this time, no evidence has surfaced suggesting that this crime was motivated by anti-Semitism. But what wasn't included in that statement was that they ruled out this being motivated by anti-Semitism, which highlights really where they are in this investigation, that they are in the very early stages, and it's why they are urging caution for people to jump to conclusions. Now, what we do know is on this block where I'm standing near downtown Detroit, this is where police found the body of Wool. They say they followed a trail of blood to her home. That's where they believe the killing actually took place. And again, they have not released any arrest or identity of a suspect they have at this point. Now, as for what happened, while they still work through that, it did happen, and it's why this community is trying to figure out how to move forward at this point. A memorial service was held on Sunday where speakers from those who knew her best all the way to state elected officials shared what they remembered about the 40-year-old Samantha Wool. Take a listen to Michigan's Attorney General Dana Nessel.
Samantha Wool may have been the nicest person that I have ever met or will ever meet in my lifetime. Sam did more for our community, our state, our world, our lives, in her short time here on earth than most will ever accomplish in 1,000 lifetimes over. And her killer will not rob us of the memory of her joy and warmth and kindness that she leaves behind.
Over the course of that service, we also heard from a state senator who was with Wool the night before she was found dead at a wedding, and she said the only consolation she has in this is that some of her final memories with Wool were of laughter and of happiness. Now, moving forward, the FBI is assisting the Detroit police in trying to figure out what happened here. The community is trying to move forward and process what happened as investigators, again, at this point, are trying to figure out why. Omar Jimenez, CNN, Detroit.
In Washington, 9 Republicans have entered the race for Speaker of the House of Representatives. They will make their case before the Republican conference later today after Jim Jordan failed 3 times to win the spot this past week. The House has been paralyzed without a Speaker for nearly 3 weeks, which ousted Speaker Kevin McCarthy calls embarrassing. Manu Raju has more on the ongoing drama.
House Republicans remain in turmoil almost 3 weeks after the unprecedented ouster of a sitting speaker. Kevin McCarthy was pushed out after 8 Republicans joined with Democrats and voted out Kevin McCarthy as speaker. This was initiated by House Republicans, and they have not been able to coalesce around anyone to replace McCarthy as of yet. And the House can't do any business, no legislating at all, until a speaker is elected. And they have been unable to unite behind any candidate. First, they nominated Steve Scalise, the House Republican Majority Leader. He was unable to get the votes to be elected Speaker. He bowed out before going to the floor. Jim Jordan, House Judiciary Committee Chairman, was nominated then to be the next Speaker of the House. He did go to the floor 3 times, and he failed to win over enough support. He could only afford to lose 4 Republican votes on his party line vote. He lost 25 on his 3rd ballot. Ultimately, he bowed to reality and stepped aside. Now, 9 Republican candidates have filed to run for Speaker. Unclear which of those 9 will ultimately get the Republican nomination, and more importantly, who can get the 217 votes that they would need on the floor of the House to be elected Speaker. It is unclear if any of them can, given the sharp division within the ranks.
It's the biggest FU to Republican voters I've ever seen.
This conference is absolutely broken.
Americans are sick of it, and I know most members of the House are sick of it. It is time for big boys and big girls to stop with the nonsense. As swampy as swamp gets.
We need to get over it, and we need to move on.
We cannot have an entire branch of government offline.
We got to get our act together, because I'm getting calls from my constituents and saying, what the hell is going on with you Republicans?
I think history will assign the blame in the right places.
Now, a bit here about the timing. On Monday evening, that's when the House Republicans will meet behind closed doors yet again. Those candidates will try to make their pitch to the conference. They'll answer questions from their members. They'll do that one by one, and we'll see how that ultimately goes. And Tuesday morning is a significant vote. Behind closed doors, Republicans will have a secret ballot leadership election. That means a majority of their conference will vote to nominate the next speaker candidate. That person, there will be a secret ballot election, so it's unclear exactly who's the front runner and who might emerge here, but we'll see how close that person who gets the nomination is to the magic number on the House floor, 217 17 votes to be elected Speaker. This is challenging for any Republican candidate because in the narrowly divided House, there are only 221 Republicans. Democrats are going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader. That means that person, the candidate, the Republican nominee, must limit defections in the ranks, and it is unclear if any of them will be able to do that after we've seen just Republicans going after each other after McCarthy was pushed out, unable to get behind anyone, unable to do the nation's business, and much business is waiting, dealing with aid to Israel, calls for aid to Ukraine, avoiding a government shutdown by mid-November. None of that can be dealt with. The Republican agenda is completely stalled amid this GOP leadership infighting. Can they get it resolved this coming week? That remains a huge question, but a possibility it could still be unresolved and slip into another week if they can't get their act together behind a nominee. Manu Raju, CNN, Capitol Hill.
Argentina's presidential race is headed to a runoff according to partial results from Sunday's first round. Far-right economist Javier Milei is one of the candidates in next month's second round. His supporters celebrated just as they did after his shocking win in the open primaries in August. He will face economy minister
Can they get a Speaker of the House? A song by Paul Beckman, Paul Rainbow Song. Also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world. I'm getting better, but I'm still experiencing the agony and suffering of diverticulitis. Created October 23rd, 2023. Can they get another Speaker of the House? Can they? Can they? Can they get another Speaker of the House? Can they? Can they? Can they? Can they get another Speaker of the House? Can they? Can they? Can they? Can they? Can they get another Speaker of the House? Can they? Can they? Can they? Can they? Can they? Can they? Can they get another Speaker of the House? Can they get another Speaker of the House? Oh, can they get another Speaker of the House? Can they get another Speaker of the House? Get another Speaker